Hello and welcome to another episode of Startups Rights. Today, my guest is a friend of mine, Sam Thurman. He's a visiting analyst at Eurazeo and also co-founder of Tiny Ventures, which is a very cool initiative, which we'll talk more about as the episode progresses. But welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Here we go. Was it episode 67, did you say?
68, I think. Now,
68. Oh, wow. Getting the numbers up. Happy to be here.
no, it was a long time coming. It was in the making. We, you know, me and Isao, we caught up a couple of times. We had really nice conversations around startups and VC. And we're like, you know what? Why not make it an actual episode? Just two friends catching up around the stuff we usually talk about, and let's just televise it. So I'm really excited about this episode. And I guess I'm just going to jump into the questions, right? Um,
Yeah, let's do it.
you, you know, you come from a background. You studied, I believe, PPE at York, if I'm not
hmm
mistaken. Kind of could have led you into many different directions, right? From consulting to finance to etc. Why VC, right? Why VC? What made you stay with VC? What made you fall in love with VC?
Yeah, I think when I was at uni, I did a bunch of different internships, like mainly in finance. I kind of bounced around from I did my first one at a pension fund, and then I did one at an investment bank, and the third one I did was at Atomico, and it just kind of instantly clicked. Like I always knew well, not always, not since I was a baby, but I kind of knew I started to come to the idea that I wanted to do something on the buy side because I liked the whole investment process and thinking about things long term and all those kind of things that come along with being on the buy side. And so when I arrived at Tomoco, that's what I was already thinking. And then so it was really a question of, is it going to be private equity or like venture capital? And seeing what VC looks like, it just immediately felt like this is really me, versus PE. Like I've never really felt like a finance bro, to kind of that kind of, I don't really, yeah, I've never really felt like I'm that kind of person. And but VC really spoke to me because it felt like you're really on the front lines of helping some of the coolest people in the world, and some of the people who are sacrificing such a lot to change the world. Like these people are giving up great jobs. I mean, they're usually super smart people. Like they could just go and do something easy, but instead they're like, you know, they have this belief that they can start something that changes the way the world works. So that's just sounded really fun to help those people. And so I think like basically to answer your question, as soon as I got there and saw what it was like, it just immediately clicked that this is sort of well suited to a bunch of things that make me me, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. Was there like a defining, eye-opening moment from different experiences, or was it just kind of like an ongoing process?
Yeah, to be honest, like it must have been March, like in my final year at uni, and I was mega stressed because I was looking for jobs and trying to do my dissertation at the same time, as well as trying to manage living in York. It was all just a mess basically, and I went to this like event at Atomico. They had like I was part of this social mobility charity called SEO London, and they had like a special event for those guys on where they just talked you through like what a VC does day to day. And so I popped down to London to go to that event, and like just hearing one of the investors at Atomico at the time, I can't remember her name now, but talk through what her day is. I was like, wow, this looks incredible. These guys are like Jedi. They're like, they're part of like a council, and they're, jetting off and meeting, like going to the battlegrounds and meeting people and reporting back to the other investment team. It just looked really cool. Like it looked like you really get a lot of ownership. You really get to meet a lot of cool people, but you still got all the cool things of being on the buy side, and being in finance, all that analytical sort of numbers kind of stuff. So it just immediately clicked to me like this looks like such a cool thing to do. Um, and so I think then that was really when it clicked. But I didn't think it would be possible, to be honest, because um, the event was lots of people from Oxbridge, and um, they seemed like, oh, they'll be ahead of me, but it still looked pretty cool. Um, so yeah, I think then basically that's when it kind of clicked. Like, oh, that's cool.
I guess good follow-up to that would be, obviously me too. I've like have a romantic view of venture capital. It's, there's a bit of, especially at a high level, right? It's such a great job. You
Yeah,
make
yeah.
get to make the coolest founders. You get to make the coolest investments, and sometimes you get so lucky. It's a life changing investment, right? But obviously, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. So I guess what's something about the job that people don't fully understand until they're inside that space.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think one thing is that like with all things people romanticize, whether it's being a rock star or being an athlete or something, people really focus on the cool parts of the role, but they kind of forget that you have to work really hard to get there. So I think venture is it's one of the areas of finance that's more kind of performance based in that there's not really hiding. A lot of VC firms they might only have like 5 or 6 people on the investment team, or even if they have more, even if they have like 15 people on the investment team, you still have a lot of responsibility. And so it does come with a lot of hard work, and you really have to actually be good at it. Like you really have to put in a lot of work to get good at it, um, and there's no real way around that. Like there's not really any kind of I mean, there are some things that people can naturally have that make you good at the job, but basically, like people underestimate the amount of hours that you have to put in of just like grinding away to get good at the job. I think that's something I'd say that people underestimate more. Um, Other than that, mm,
Some very quickly on what you said. I feel like I am always curious about this. I There are a lot of very great venture capitalists, right? So I guess my natural question for you would be: are you born a good venture capitalist, or do you become a good venture capitalist?
yeah, I guess like it's like a lot of things. There's some. It's a bit of a philosophical question, really, isn't it? Like, because you
You
could
studied
say, well,
philosophy. You studied
yeah,
philosophy.
yeah, exactly. You could say, well, at the end of the day, it's all where you're born, and if you're born in a sort of in a kind of a war zone where you're struggling to find enough things to eat, like it's probably quite difficult. But all of those like sort of philosophical, academic, silly arguments aside, um, I think at the end of the day, you have to become one, even if some people with the ideal background for venture are people who are in STEM. Say you're a PhD, you got a PhD, and you have a super technical background in a area that will give you an edge in sourcing or screening deals, right? That's some of the people who have the kind of mm, who are born into it, so to speak, because they have those kind of skills. Even those people, you still have to put in a huge amount of effort and work to then translate those skills into knowing what makes a good sort of startup investment. So I think you have to sort of they're made more than anything. I mean, like I guess Harry Stebbings is a good example of someone who was not born into it, right? Like he spent so many years just grafting away building that podcast, and then eventually the fruits of his labor started to appear. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Having interviewed so many people.
you know, oh, now I'm being interviewed. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the first time I think it's a mix of things, right? Like obviously with anything, you have a certain natural, inclination, natural aspect of things. And I
Mm,
feel like some people might be, just really good at intuition, at picking things. It's just like, there's certain skills that you can just like sit down and learn. And some people manage to turn that into the repeatable system somehow. And obviously, very much you're right. Like if you're born in Silicon Valley in the 1980s, your future in venture capital is way smoother than somebody, let's say, being born in a different country. Um, but it is mixed. And it also depends on the sector, right? Like if you're a deep tech investor, I guess PhD might be more important versus if you're like if you're investing in tech B2B. So as you said, it's a bit of but I personally feel like it's a mix of things, and which side takes kind of a more importance really, I guess, depends on the situation and the person. I guess, speaking of that, in this day and age, I feel like VC landscape is changing quite fast too, especially with AI and the valuations. And it seems a bit different. It's not like before where you could just like find a Facebook, give like 100K and get like a 2 billion return. Um, so as a junior VC, how do you build an edge? Is it the network? Is it the hyper specialization? Is it the endless hackathons and demo days? Like, what is it that helps you build that edge these days?
And by edge, you mean like a kind of pitch to get a job at a VC full time, or do you mean just to become a good
You
VC?
know, obviously, anybody who becomes a junior VC, I mean, not everybody, but there's a good amount that wants to move up and become a partner, and there's a lot of VC funds out there. There's a lot of VC funds. There's a lot of people who are aware of VC who want to pursue that path. So how do you stand out? How do you manage to, if you want to remain in VC and make it to
Mm-mm.
the principal or partner level? How do you build that edge?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think like the number one. Mm, I think one of the main things, which is sort of less tangible to say, is to just be super aware of what you don't know, and don't start making like assumptions willy nilly. Just like kind of just throwing assumptions around. I think like the a big mistake you can do is assume you know what the dynamics of a market are, or like look at a pitch deck and just and assume, or like what would you say? Like look at a pitch deck and um make a judgment on it that's not kind of data driven and it's based on maybe your like biases. And so I think as a junior VC, you have to be super conscious of your biases, because if you kind of aren't listening to a founder when they're explaining their product, or if you don't like a market because like suppose you're looking at a dating app and you don't like dating apps as a person, and so therefore you disregard the market, you could potentially miss a great investment, because just because it's in a market that you don't personally like, or you don't personally see the future of, doesn't mean there's not like a viable path to eventual return there. So I think that's the first one. Is just being super aware of your own biases, and that kind of know thyself quote is super important, because I think it's very easy to fall prey to kind of your own your own likes and dislikes, and convince yourself that those likes and dislikes are the way the world is. Um, and then the second point, I think, yeah, it's good as a junior. It's good to develop like a sector speciality, just because it gives you an anchor in your career. Like if you can become the deep tech guy or girl, then that gives you a right to, well, not a right to, but it gives you more of like a comparative advantage when if you have to go work somewhere else, or it gives you a reason to be in the team basically. Because people from my background, I think something we struggle with a little bit is, if you're from sort of a social science background, why does the team need you? Like, what can you offer that other people can't? Because at the end of the day, everyone in a VC team, given they're so small, has to be like has a value add. You can't just be hanging around and learning whilst that's good. Like you have to have some kind of value. And so I think developing a speciality or some kind of spike early on is a good thing. And a sector speciality is one of the things that you can do. And then, yeah, I think developing that network is another like value add. Like maybe you're not the sort of deep tech person, but you bring in lots of deals because you have a great network. Um, so I think that can also be a kind of right to stay. Um, because I think when you're a junior, at least this is the way maybe I've felt, is you're kind of buying time to learn. Because once you've got that expertise in a few years in the industry, you then have like a natural ability to help founders, and you've seen enough that experience will pay for itself. But until you get to that kind of um, almost like inflection point, you're kind of always fighting for a reason to be around. And so doing that, like developing a speciality in a sector, or through a network, I think is a real, I guess, a real what would the word be?
Like an edge.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a real priority for, I think, young VCs. So that you can then use that to buy time, that you can then convert into kind of seeing how to help founders and being a value add. Because at the end of the day, like you want to get to a point when you become a middle VC that you're the person the founder wants on their board. So I think that's the kind of way you have to think about it. You have to kind of think, you have to buy some time doing what I just said, and then think, okay, like what do I need to be the kind of person that a founder would choose my fund just for me, you know? Because I think that's what happens a lot is I don't know for certain, but what I've seen where I've spoke to other junior VCs is like some deals will be won just on the basis of the individual. Like the founder wants that person and they'll take the firm with it. So I think that's the point that many junior VCs would be like looking to get to. But that's kind of my 2 cents on it, what it's worth.
With specialty part, if you did your PhD in quantum physics or genetics, you becoming a
Mm.
biotech or deep tech VC is very much kind of, that could naturally happen, right? Because that's your focus area versus somebody, as you said, coming from more social science background, more from generalist background, like developing a specialty. How do you think of developing a specialty? Like, how does that happen in your opinion?
Yeah, it's pretty tricky actually. Um, because well, it's not tricky if you've already got a PhD in the area, but if you haven't and you're looking to start like today, developing that speciality, it's quite tricky. And I think you've just got to put it in the hours. Basically, is the short answer. Like one good advice I got when I did the VC Lab program is to pick like a real niche. So imagine like you want fintech to be your spike. Don't just say fintech. Pick like a niche within fintech. So pick like I don't know. Like wealth management fintech that's for like retail investors that are like at the upper end, like something really niche, so that in a few months you can really know everything about that little corner of the market, and then you could expand from there. So I think that's a pretty good piece of advice, to be honest, because a lot of people I think they set out to be like, oh, the fintech expert, but the trouble is like that's just such a big so broad. It's going to take you years unless you're unless you're like a founder in this space, or you've got some kind of like other thing in that space that grants you the title of fintech expert. Like it's going to take you a really long time. So I think as someone just starting off, like if you're a student or a young professional looking to switch into VC, picking like a real tiny little corner and owning that little corner is I think a good way to start. And then to do that, writing a blog or making some videos, like creating some kind of content around that little corner, I think is quite good because it keeps you kind of mm, keeps you accountable, I guess. Like if you have your own little blog, like I mean, like this podcast, I imagine this podcast is quite good for you because it really keeps you locked in. It keeps you. You probably have like a really good if people were to ask you what's going on in the ecosystem, you could probably tell them quite easily because you do this. I don't know.
I think you're right. And yeah, like the more exposure you have, the more kind of conversations you have, the more also you're inclined to develop your own corner. I guess I'm curious, speaking of corners, and have you managed to develop your own kind of niche interest area?
Yeah, a little bit. With working here, like I've been looking at insurtech a lot, so a little bit, but even then, not fully. Um, and that again, it's like the number one challenge for people from like a social science background is how do you do that? Um, so because it takes a long time to become like an expert in something and really know it, and not only know it, but know it so well that you can go to an interview and be the person, like the person that has known it best of all the people they've spoke to. So it takes quite a time, to be honest. And I think the best way is it's best if you've worked in that industry, or done something like spent all day for like a few years doing that kind of thing. So it's difficult, but it's not impossible. Like you do see more and more now people who have just gone straight into VC from like a social science background. So there are a few of them out there. Um, but I guess it makes it a little bit more challenging, I guess.
Yeah, I remember talking to a VC investor, and she was telling me they have this person on their team who's just absolutely obsessed with logistics. Just all
Mhm.
they read and research, and then they know it in and out, which is very fascinating, to be honest, to be that obsessed with that one
Mm.
specific thing. Do you think operator experience is necessary to be a good investor? Do you think like at some point you have to work in a startup to be a good investor? Or do you think you can just like work through your time, VC?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And it's a good one to ponder, I think, for people in our shoes. Because like I don't know. I don't think I don't know if you've seen any kind of data on the topic, whether there's been a study that, because I spoke to someone once and they said that there's a study been done and that it doesn't matter. But I've never seen that study, and so I can't speak to it really. But um, like I don't know. I'd love to know. I'd love to see a study done and know a definitive answer. But speaking kind of intuitively, mm, I wouldn't think so. I mean, like logically, you'd think to do something best, the best thing to do is to just study that one thing. Like to become a to become like a really good gardener, the best thing to do is to just study what it is to be a gardener and practice it over and over and over again. Like I guess that's the idea of a school or a university. But I think I think maybe one thing that people I think a lot of people think that if you've been like a founder before, it makes you a better investor. And I think I can see where they're coming from, to be honest, because like I think maybe one thing that they you get from being a founder before is a lot of empathy for founders. I think that's super important. Like if we can say anything more definitively, I think it's that every investor to be a good investor should have empathy for founders. I think that's probably quite hard to argue against because at the end of the day, it's your job. At the end of the day, it's your job to be liked by the founder, right? If you're going to be, if especially if you're competing for a board seat, it doesn't help for them to hate you. Um, and I think empathy goes a long way to building rapport with someone, and I guess as well, if you're going to be on their board one day, that rapport is necessary because you might have to suggest some ideas, and it'd be good if they listen to you, I guess. Um, so I don't know, but it's a really interesting question. Given you're somewhat of a data lake these days with 68 episodes, have you kind of pieced the puzzle together a little bit? Do you think? Do you lean one way or the other?
From the conversation I've had, I think it's very much split 50-50. Some people believe yes, some people say not really. Uh,
And why do people say not really?
because there's quite a few examples of people, like I think one that just rapidly comes to my mind is Shardul Shah from Index Ventures, who joined as an intern, and he was
You just blitzed it.
he was the one that sourced the Eurazeo with Google, the 32 billion acquisition.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
obviously there are a lot of examples like that, but also there's quite a few. There's also more and more into movement between VC and startups and VC. And to be honest, in my personal opinion, right, like if you build a scaled a startup in, let's say, fintech space, I think your understanding of go-to-market function and it will be quite useful to founder building in that space. And being a
Yeah,
VC
yeah.
goes beyond just deploying a capital, right? It's not just money; it's also like the advice and the. So I think it's very much 50. It depends on the person, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like, I can definitely see how, like you said, I mean, if you've built a startup before, you have that massive that memory to compare every startup you see to. But then I guess the counter argument to that is well, you have a sample of one, and so what your experience might not be super representative of what is good or bad, and so you might be measuring every startup you see from then on against like what would you say, like an invalid measurement because it's
Mm,
your
mm.
experience may be a bigger abnormally for similar people in your space. So yeah, there's counter arguments to it too. But one thing I think maybe it does help with is I don't know. I was going to say knowing what makes good founders because people bang on about how important the team is, right? Um, and if you've seen teams fail or if you've had that direct experience with working with people and what kind of people did well and didn't do well on your team and
If you
uh,
hire the
uh,
good people,
yeah, yeah, maybe you can suss out the people more. But who knows? Yeah, it's a difficult one.
is it
It's
is it a
it's
difficult question? Yeah. And as I said, I guess there's no like a clear answer to it. But I guess, it's fascinating. We're talking about this, and I feel like we're kind of covering a few different things. So a bit of a rapid fire to you would be, there's obviously different stages of VC, late stage, early stages, journalism, specialists. You know, how do you think people should approach thinking about those different aspects of venture capital world, right? Like, I feel like different stages require different personas, different personalities, temperaments, different knowledge. When you think about it,
Mm,
like, what makes early stage appealing to you versus like a growth stage, for example?
yeah, it's another good question. Um, I think for me, it's that you're you're still dealing with. First of all, it's quite exciting still because the business models you're dealing with is, well, not the business models themselves necessarily, but the subject of the businesses you're dealing with are more experimental than, say, like seed versus Series B. At the seed stage, 50% of the companies you see, well, probably even 50%, it's probably even higher than that. It's really like, I don't know what percent of startups that make it from seed to B, but it's probably like 80% die or something like that. So you're still working with a lot more potential than you are at Series B. So that makes it quite exciting. And then it's also still a lot more about the people than it is when it comes to Series B. So that also makes it quite interesting because I guess being good at the job at that stage is a bit more about going out and finding who's good and meeting people and having opinions on the way the world will be in 5 to 10 years time. So whereas when you get to later stages, I guess it moves from the spectrum of more about the people to more about the numbers. And as the sort of cohort decreases and more and more startups fail and there's fewer and fewer remaining, the sourcing part is less important because, if there's, yeah, it gets to the point where everyone knows who the people standing are, because there's so few of them. So I think, like, I think the more of a people person you are, the better it is to go earlier. Like if you're just all about people and you just love it, and you don't really want to work with numbers too much, then I think it's being like an angel investor or like pre-seed investor is really good because there is no numbers really to work on at that stage, and it's all about the vision. It's all about the background of the person and trying to infer from that whether or not these are the right people to build it versus competitors, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're super analytical, then going later stage, I guess, is for you. So that's how it kind of changes. But I guess, they're all a different. I used to kind of think that what makes a good investment at each stage was kind of similar, but it's completely different from each stage. And so, each stage it's a different set of things you're looking at and a different set of requirements. And so, yeah, they're all super different. But I think for a lot of people, what they imagine the VC role to be like is kind of seed and Series A, which is more of a mix at Series A of numbers and people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
think
does that
that's
answer?
the yeah, I think that's the kind of like a sweet spot for VC, right? The Series A, where there's a bit of a product market fit, but still early enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, but I feel like also the lines are being blurred a bit. Some seed investments resemble like growth stage investments. It's like 100 million seed, 1 billion seed.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think of these crazy valuations?
Yeah, I think it's just um because it's mainly with the AI startups, I think, right? I think that's mainly what's going on. Um, and I think if people wanna look into it more, the State of European Tech report of the last one that came out has a great like thing about this on the executive summary about round sizes inflating and what's going on behind that. I think it's there's like a lot of mega rounds for AI companies, and when you take out the AI companies, it's less the like distortion of the rounds is less so. Um, but yeah, I think it's just quite simply the AI hype, and people still are super. That's it's still going on. It's still um, very much, yeah, going on, and people are still very much imagining that there will be complete productivity transformations by a lot of these companies. And so when they look at like a verticalized AI service company, they still are imagining that it's going to completely dominate the industry or completely change the industry in that time frame. So in the next sort of 3 to 7 years, um, and so they're willing to pay lots for it, and also there's the massive FOMO about missing out. Um, and then also I think probably what's going on behind that as well is there's quite a few massive defense tech rounds, and so I guess with those rounds, like there is some hype around it, but I think it's also they have a lot of these startups just need more money anyway because they're
Apex, like
dealing
all
with
the
hardware. Yeah.
yeah.
But I think the most interesting point is the AI point. And I'm endlessly kind of talking about this with people about if there's going to be an apocalypse of jobs. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think like there is going to be massive disruption from AI, like, and these valuations are justified, or do
Well,
you
I
think
it does seem like a bit bubbly. I'm not gonna lie, and I don't know the. I think we are obviously past this stage where like AI is just gonna die down. No, AI is gonna be a thing and it's here to stay. Now, obviously, you got to make this grand, declarations if you want to get the funding, right? You can just say we're gonna have 1% marginal improvement. That's not gonna get any money. You're gonna say we're gonna change things completely. Now, how much of it is gonna be true, and how much of it is gonna be happening within 5 to 10 years? I don't know, but obviously, um, it's gonna keep happening. Now, I don't know. I think. Do you think the market will correct? Like, do you think the hype valuations, this hype around AI will die down a bit? The market will
I
correct
think
itself?
so because did you see like Sora shut down
Really
the yeah, they're shutting it down because it's just so unprofitable. And
interesting.
so, like, I don't know. I mean, the reference point I have is like, um, is AI in my like daily life, like how I use it in my daily life, and I can definitely see how it makes people way more productive. Um, but I don't know. I struggle to. I'm not sure if it's going to be the case that the adoption is going to come super fast. Like, what I'm thinking of in my head is like, imagine you've got an AI company that is offering like next generation services in a specific vertical, right? Which is what a lot of them are. Like, like Lagora is offering next generation services for the legal industry, right? Um, so what's justifying like a massive valuation for that company is that they're going to be able to increase the productivity of a lot of these firms massively, and then because of that, have like quite high ACBs and generate a lot of value. But I think that it's also priced on these companies, and maybe that's not true, but I think it's priced on the the assumption that these companies are going to be able to do that in the next like 3 years. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're thinking it's going to be longer than that. Um, but the way, like the ability, the what would you say, the level of adoption I see from like everyday people and the real challenge, difficulty integrating like AI enabled tools into their daily lives is massive. Like, Notion, for example, has like a bunch of AI features. Um, and like a lot of people, they're just so busy that they don't have the time to actually start like learning to use it and all that kind of stuff. And so like, I don't know if I think the productivity gains might be there. Well, probably almost, I think they're very likely to be there. But just in that time frame, like, I mean, if you imagine how long it might take these more, not legacy industries, but like less tech savvy users to actually learn to use the tools, because I don't think they're as easy to use as they seem. Like ChatGPT seems really easy to use, and it is for a lot of things. Um, but integrating them into like your actual job isn't necessarily as easy as people imagine. Like the hallucination problem is a pretty serious thing, such that for a lot of people, if it hallucinates 1 or 2% of the time. They
In
won't bother using
healthcare,
it.
for example.
Yeah. And so, and even in jobs where it's like not as life and death as healthcare, if it's getting things incorrect, like, you know, 40% of the time or even like 20% of the time, for some people that will just put them off learning to use it. And they'll think, oh, I can just do this quicker myself. I'm not going to bother. So the bottom line is, yeah, I don't know how quickly it's going to be. We're going to get to the levels of adoption that basically um, justify the valuations. And then the trouble is, if it takes longer for people to use the AI tools, that gives way longer for the incumbents to bake them into their current products. Like, suppose you're trying to replace the G Suite, the Google Suite, right? And you have like a next gen Google Sheets. Um, Maybe today it's much better than Google Sheets because Google's slower. But like with the way Gemini's going, if it takes 2 years for people to start using it and Google can catch up in that time, it's kind of like Calendly. Like people, I used to always use Calendly, and now that Google's released its own calendar thing, I kind of don't use Calendly anymore. And like, you know, it's a, if and I think people's workflows are really sticky. Like people at work, they really they really like to use. I mean, how much people love Excel, and like maybe some people like. There's definitely a strong argument to be made that Excel is just the best product out there. But like, I think the Microsoft ecosystem has its problems, right? I don't think like Outlook. Like I don't think Outlook's the best like, email tool, and yet it's super. It's still the default, I think, in the corporate world. Um, anyway, that's kind of rambled on, but the point is, like, I think that the time to adoption thing is like, I think that's the big question. But I don't know.
This is such a good point. You're right. Humans are creatures of habit. They get used to using something, and it's very. And you're right. There's also so many tools out there. I experience myself like it's a bit of a tool fatigue. Every day I see there's new AI tool out there. I'm like, I don't really have time or energy to sit down and like figure out how this works. This is kind of a very good point, which made me. I want to ask this question to you. Um, with all the, how do you make a competitive startup in this day and age? And by that, what do I mean is, you see with like a new Claude update, of this new OpenAI update, a bunch of startups are raised out of existence, right? They have the capital, they have the brain powers, they have the size to make these things happen. So, how do you stay competitive? Like, how do you come up with you might come up with like an Excel, better AI Excel startup, but then Claude might update it and boom, you're out of business. So like, how do you remain
Mm,
competitive? Like, how do you think about these things?
yes, I don't know, to be honest. Like, it's because it is so difficult. Like every time the models update, as a whole, it's like it's like those kind of platform games you'd play when the screen moves along. If you don't move fast enough, you die. Like honestly, every time there's an update, like a whole bunch of them die off, and so it's difficult. I think that I still think the best thing you can do is kind of own the customer journey, and like and be really close with your customers
Like
because,
full stack?
well, I don't know, like you can still be super, like even if you're still more of a product than a company. um I think building a moat around you tailor your service to them more than the model ever could is like,
Mm.
I don't know, because you're competing against, I guess what you're competing against is a super general product. Like let's take ChatGPT as an example. Like it has to cater to everybody. And so it can't ever be super specific to the workflows of your customer. Um and so if for your little ICP you can be like as easy as possible to use, then maybe they'll trade that increase in usability for like a decrease in quality.
Mm.
But I don't know. I really don't know because everything's moving so fast these days that it's like I think it's there's still like so much in the air around like what, like basically which strategy is best to compete with, um the sort of this this line of innovation that keeps killing things. Because some people will say that, like, it's only a matter of time before all of these AI service startups just get killed by the big model providers, and other people will say, like I mentioned, if you own the vertical, then that's your moat. And I think, to be honest, that's been kind of a trend that, like, a lot of people have been going towards. Like, when the when the sort of ChatGPT moment happened in 2022, and there started to be lots of AI startups, a lot of them were quite horizontal, and they'd be like, "Oh, document ingestion for any industry, and insights for any industry." But now the ones that are the sort of hottest have all gone like super deep on one industry. And so I guess the implicit assumption there is like, okay, these people who are super tailored to an industry are the ones that are going to be able to stick around. So I guess that's the way the money is moving. But there's probably some counter arguments to that. That
I guess
I don't know.
what you would, what I'm hearing is that you're saying it's going to be a bit of a reversal, the future of VC, as in you don't go for, you essentially will focus on gaining a very large share of a very small market.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Interesting.
And it might be that there's like a best in class tool for each industry. But then the counter argument to that is the whole thing we're talking about with adoption, where it's like, well, if adoption takes a really long time, then the current tools that are like horizontal tools will potentially catch up. I mean, it's hard to imagine the Microsoft ecosystem catching up with anything, but perhaps given enough time, it will. Um,
This is
so
funny.
yeah,
From the conversation, you are very entrenched in the ecosystem and you talk to quite a few people. Obviously, AI is the focus, AI drug discovery, AI legal, etc. Very famous, very known. Everybody hears about it. What are some of the underrated technologies that you hear and you're like, actually, this is really cool and it's gonna gain momentum?
yeah, I think the robotics thing is really cool, and like bringing the the sort of advances in AI into a physical space, and that can mean a variety of things, like whether it's computer vision and allowing a robot to be able to use the sort of what would you call it, like the sort of thinking power and interact with things. I think that the company that can unlock that is going to be doing really well. Um, and then also bringing the kind of life co-pilot functions that AI has, where you can, a lot of people, they kind of use ChatGPT to ask it everything. They ask it, well, why, what's this symptom I'm having? What does it mean? Or they ask it, what does this term I don't understand? I mean, they ask it everything. And so I actually saw a few cool startups that are trying to kind of bring this idea of having like a robot co-pilot into like a physical form factor. So having it like basically how the Alexa is, but a bit of a better version of that. So I think that's a cool space. And so basically the like application of all the cool things that AI can do on your browser, bringing that into the physical space. Um, that's kind of I think, one great frontier. But then again, the problem with it is it's a pretty scary idea, I think, because like, and people don't seem to talk about that very much, how depressing it might be, because what like what's the world going to look like when there's a drone that can think like
Yeah.
ChatGPT can? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
and that can see the world and interact with the world. What would you say? That can interact with the world.
Autonomously?
Oh yeah, autonomously, basically. So such that it can recognize a tree and it knows how
Yeah.
far away it is. It can move over there and move back. Like when it can competently interact with the physical world. Like, I don't know if that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially application of AI in defense is one of the scariest things to me
Yeah,
personally.
it's a bit freaky because,
It
like,
is.
what are you going to do if you want to protest your government and it's got an army of robot dogs that's like really fast, does not care about killing a human being, and will do anything that they tell it to? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's a weird what, like, this the thing about working in VCs, you see all these like technologies that were at the forefront, and it's a weird time. Like, there's someone once said like, "Oh, they miss tech being fun," and I thought that was really funny because yeah, a lot of the tech, like the tech news, is kind of scary
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like it used to be. I remember when I was a kid and I was growing up, and you'd be like, "Oh man, like the next generation of the Xbox is going to be so
Yeah.
cool," or like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like, we're going to be able
Virtual
to."
reality. We're gonna play games in virtual reality. That was like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
furthest we would go.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like flying
Yeah. Yeah.
cars, or
Yeah.
like a flying skateboard, and you're gonna have to like have a jetpack and pew, fly around. And it's gonna all like go and live on Mars, and we're gonna have
Yeah. Yeah.
spaceships like
Yeah.
Star Wars. It was all this cool stuff, and now it's like, oh yeah, we might get killed by a robot dog or a robot bird, or we might all become completely redundant and poor because there's no need for us anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's very scary.
oh
And
yeah,
that's touched upon a very interesting point. I was actually watching a YouTube video with Brian Cox, is a famous physicist and astronomer,
yeah, yeah,
show,
yeah.
and it was saying how one of the hypotheses why we don't see other great civilizations in the galaxies because there's this concept known as great filters that once you reach a certain technological advancement, you like the civilization ends up self-destructing, right? So you know, maybe
Yeah,
that might be
brief,
the
brief,
case. It
brief.
might be true. We spoke a lot of things about the technology, about the VC. One of the key aspects of this, at the center of it, is the human, is the founder element of it. One, I'm gonna, I guess, combine two of my questions together. One is, what are the? I feel like the founder archetype has changed a bit too in this the age of AI. So I guess, what qualities and factors you see more and more, and two, what's the importance of ecosystem, like fostering an ecosystem to make sure that you see these founders, you stay in touch with these founders and before the big VCs, I guess, come in.
Yeah, I think that's more and more important these days because there's all this trend of kind of preempting rounds and going earlier and earlier and earlier. So I think as a VC, like more and more important, it's more and more important to be getting out there and meeting people and building relationships because like these the deals that have been, or at least it seems like the deals that have been the most competitive, if have been super, 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 super competitive, and having an intro to one of the founders can really mean the difference between being able to invest and not. And so I think it's more important than ever to be at those house parties, to be getting out there, shaking hands, um, you know, smiling and having a good time and building relationships. I think it's more important than ever. And then on the other side, there's also, it seems, more like hacker communities than ever. There's more sort of builders groups than ever and founder communities that you can go and meet and kind of help out. And I think that's one of the great joys of the job, to be honest, that you can spend your Saturday at a house party and be working because if you're meeting founders, well, then you're doing the job. Um, so I think it's super, super important, and it's like more, yeah, and it's increasingly important. And then what was the first part of the question?
It was I guess I feel like
Oh, the founder
personally the
profile.
founder profile and the archetype has changed a bit,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
I'm saying, what do you see more often these days?
I think there's this like stereotype of like the cracked founder going around where they're like, 12 and they were
Yeah,
lived on some Swedish barn and they like have built this like super advanced AI product and they like there's that kind of thing going around. Um but I don't know if that's real, if that's like a genuine um like what the data says about it, such that whether that is genuinely a signal for a good founder or if it's just like a 20 BC byproducts, because those stories are really cool and
yeah,
like
yeah.
we probably have a kind of selection bias going on where we remember them more. So I don't know whether that's a real thing, like whether it is really the case that then the founder of the next generation is going to be this like high school dropout that is super scrappy and all these kind of terms like scrappy, cracked.
Correct.
Um, there's a bunch of these like terms
I'll be honest, I
that
don't
are,
like the word cracked. I really
it's a
don't
bit
like.
cringe. Maybe that's like a bit of a controversial opinion calling it cringe, but like the whole thing around it is a bit like um intense, like, oh wow, like this is the most intelligent person I've ever met, and they're insane and they're like hyper obsessed. Um but yeah, I guess like that I don't know. I mean, in the founders that I've like actually seen that I've thought are good, I think the one thing that can be said is they're just close to the problem. Like they have some kind of insight to the problem that makes them the person to solve it. Like whether it's they were working in the industry and they built up enough expertise to see the problem and want to solve it, and they've found the right team to do so. Um, yeah, I think having that closest, like the founder market, that classic idea of founder market fit, I think is still super important. And having like a and then having like a right to win, like being close to the problem and having a reason why it's you that is a good person to solve it. Like and having that reason be like super relevant to what the market needs. I think, and that's like a kind of a classic thing that's almost always been the case, I think. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably what I'd say,
Yeah.
but it's a hard one.
Especially if you're like building in legacy or manufacturing space, I feel like you have to understand the problem, and you also have to have a certain credibility to be able to sell into, let's say, like a agri manufacturing, you know, uh, businesses. It's a different world, right? You have to understand the market as well. At the same time, you got to be young enough to understand the new technology, but also old enough to spend enough time in the space to understand the problem as well. So I agree. I agree with your notion. We talked about very different things, and I guess one of the saying, in terms of the people and community, is your community, the tiny adventures initiatives that you
Yeah,
started. What inspired you, and where do you want to take it?
yeah. I just again just closeness to the problem, I guess. Not calling myself a great founder, but like I think I don't know if you've read that essay by what's his name, Paul Graham, but he just said like fix the things in your life, and you probably will find people like you, and they'll be useful to other people. And so a big problem I had in my life was getting a job, like getting into VC. And I just felt like I wanted to like on the side of breaking into VC, I wanted to show off my skills, like show that I'm really good at it. But there wasn't really any way of doing that, like because when you do a fellowship, I mean, it's hard to show that you're good from just that because like you're learning and there's not like a thing you can show. So I started hanging out with some of my friends, and we started doing like putting together investment materials and that kind of stuff, and using that to learn and get better. And then on the other side, like when I was at places like Atomico and we were looking for candidates, um, I really wanted to make sure that the job went to the best person, and no matter where they were from. And what I wished I had when I was looking for candidates was just a leaderboard, where you can go like, "Oh, this person's the best," and we'll give them an interview. Um, and so I just felt like a competition married those two things together. Like it allows people to show really how good they are. Like, not just what logos they've got on their CV, but really how good are you, and prove yourself. And then on the flip side, because VCs get so many applications, it allows you to just cut straight to the case study stage and see, right, who is actually good. Um, and we can see that from the documents, um, and then also it's just quite fun as well, like having a competition. Competition is always fun and entertaining, like whether it's X Factor or Britain's Got Talent or Master Chef. They're almost inherently fun. Um, and so that's what kind of inspired me to put it together. And it's also just nice to have a vehicle to like just keep meeting fun people in in like future investors. I think peer to peer networking is something that people kind of sleep on a little bit. Like people forget to build relationships with people their own age, and like that they will also be important in like
Yeah,
10 years.
yeah,
And they just try and network with people who are sort of older than them. But there's nothing like there's nothing better than when you're at like a networking event and you're with all these people who are older than you who are like, oh, a bit annoyed when you talk to them because you're a junior. There's nothing better than meeting someone your own age and being
yeah,
like, how's
yeah,
it going? We
exactly.
don't have to do corporate speak. We can
Yeah,
we can talk to each other on a real basis.
yeah,
Um, so that it's also just nice to be building like a kind of a community that's super open as well. Like it's really about just connecting people who all are super passionate about helping this continent's, or for that matter anywhere, the founders to achieve their dreams, you know? Um, so yeah, that's kind of what it's all about, really,
Time
in a not
Adventures.
too much of a hippie way.
No, Time Adventures is really cool. I've been to one of your events and it was lovely people, lovely event. Really enjoyed it. And you're right. I think genuine friendships and genuine connections go a long way. I feel like people have always, not always, but often have a view like in a transactional way, but
Yeah, super transactional.
super transaction, and it doesn't really go far. You know, it doesn't really
Yeah,
become anything. And and I guess part of the reason why we're making this podcast happen is because we do have a genuine connection,
yeah,
and
it's
genuine
brilliant, and it's
exactly
so much nicer than I cannot. One of the things I really bugs me is, you know, the kind of corporate speak, the kind of like falseness of it all. Like, so it's just so refreshing to like talk to people in a direct way and have like an authentic connection.
exactly.
Because, you know, I think that's one of the things that's most draining about a lot of networking events is you spend a lot of time like just engaged in small
Yeah,
talk and like,
yeah.
wow, what do you do? And like doing the rounds of the kind of
Here's my email.
acceptable, yeah, acceptable questions to ask people, and like, you know, yeah, that's kind of why I kind of just stopped sharing my LinkedIn with people, because it just feels so pointless. Like, this the amount of times I've been like, oh, let's connect on LinkedIn, and it's been like, why? Like, you I'm not saying, trying to sound antisocial. Like, it's really great to connect with people on LinkedIn, but at the same time, like, um, it's, I don't know, you get tired of just, I don't know, just trying to connect with people for the sake of it. I think it's so nice when you can have a genuine conversation with someone and you really talk about what actually really matters to them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Good stuff, Sam. And I really, really enjoyed our conversation today. I'm gonna ask my final question, but before that, I gotta say this is one of the like having this kind of conversation is always so fun. It just feels like I don't even see there's a microphone or a camera. I just feel like I'm talking to you like we grabbed coffee last time.
It's good.
Um,
Yeah,
it's always a good feeling. I guess my final question to you would be like, how do you envision future VC, your place in it, and is being a founder part of the plans eventually?
yeah. I mean, start with the last part. I kind of see myself as a founder almost already.
Oh,
Like, I think VC is such a new area of finance, relatively speaking, especially in Europe, that there's still like so much to build within on this side of the table. You know, whether it's like, you know, just simple things like making sure that most VCs are data driven. Like, that's like an old point now, and yet it's still something that like many VCs need to catch up on. And so I kind of see myself as like, that's the, if I were to, if I wanted to innovate on anything, it would be the way that this like asset class works. Um, and that's like, I guess that goes speaks to the first part of the question. Like, what excites me about it as well is the direction it's going. When you have so many different types of model of doing this job, like whether it's on stage or whether it's 20BC or, um, you know, like some of the angel syndicates that are popping up these days, like, it's so cool to see the level of innovation on like the fund side, um, because I think, you know, the goal post is so exciting. Like, if a v- if a VC is 1% more effective, how many cool founders does that mean get to do their dream? And if you get 1% more founders funded, the right founders, and using that money well, like, how many people does that change? How many people does that affect? You know, so um, it's really exciting because you're not, I mean, every job is meaningful, and it's not to say that other jobs aren't. And like, you know, I think people commonly say, "Oh, a lot of finance is like meaningless, and private equity doesn't really like, or it doesn't really do anything." But I don't think that's a good argument. But the impact of VC is super tangible. And so like when a PE fund is like 1% more effective, and they're able to like restructure a company like that many more companies, you don't feel like, oh yay, like, oh, like these people got fired, yay, the economy is now more efficient. Like, it doesn't have that same like tangible like
yeah.
effect. Whereas the feedback loop is super instant when you see, okay, more cool founders got funded, like more sort of founders from random backgrounds that otherwise wouldn't go through like the Oxbridge filter got funded, or like, you know, that kind of thing. So That's what I'm really excited about. I'm really excited about all these like new fund structures and new ways to do the job. Like I think the podcast thing has completely surprised everybody, and you see now all the sort of older, more established funds all have a podcast now. So it's really cool to see like the level of innovation on this side of the table, and I just hope it keeps going. Like I think the founder community has done really cool things with improving the quality of European founders, and I think if we can also do the same with investors, like we can get that little bit closer to our dear friends in SF and over there. So
Sam,
yeah,
thank you so much for such a lovely and insightful conversation. And there's the hopes of remaining in touch. Hopefully, I'll see you in person soon. But
yeah, definitely.
thanks for today.
Yeah, no worries. It was a great experience. Thanks so much.
Have a good one.
You too.